We're talking to Kansas 1st District Congressman Tracy Mann as he is out in southwest Kansas starting another tour of the big 1st District this week. And so we wanted to catch you just before you head back to Washington, Tracy, and talk about maybe some of the things that you know Kansans have been talking to you about and what you expect them to say to you between now and when you head back to start out the 2024 session of Congress.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Thanks for having me on. We're doing 21 stops in 21 different counties this week, Nick, and today we're all over southwest Kansas. You know, we're in liberal Ulysses, kind of working our way up to Scott City, over to Dighton, and we'll head back to Salina. We go back to Washington, D.C. for votes starting on Tuesday. You know, the three issues that have risen to the top practically every town hall is the border, the importance of the Farm Bill, and our debt and spending. You know, those are the issues that are front and center on people's mind for good reason. Very important things happening to the district, impacting Kansans, and hence those are the three of the main topics we've been talking about.
Well, I talked a little bit about the border with Senator Marshall. Yeah, you can tell him I called him Congressman. That's okay. I'm sure Roger will laugh. But no, Senator Marshall and I had a conversation here prior to the holiday about the border, and frankly, is there something that Congress can do, or is the gridlock between a Republican-controlled House and a Democrat-controlled Senate going to mean that there isn't a lot Congress can do about the border situation?
Well, it's been very frustrating so far. This is the number one issue facing the country right now. And just understand the numbers. So they just released earlier this week the number of illegal immigrants that came across the border last month in December. More than 300,000, Nick. All-time record. This means in the last 3 years, we've had 5.4 million people come across illegally, and that doesn't count about 1.5 million what they're called gotaways. These are the people the Border Patrol know came into the country. We don't know who they are, where they're from. We are so vulnerable. We are so wide open. It's so bad that you even have Democrat mayors. So like the Democrat mayor of New York City is talking about how bad our border policies are right now. So that's starting potentially to bring President Biden to the table to be serious about his number one responsibility, and that's protecting this nation. But he's been unwilling to do it so far, and it's been very, very frustrating, to say the least.
Well, and what I'm trying to understand, Tracy, from your perspective and the perspective of those in the Big First is now that we've got governors for good reason in some border states shipping off some of these immigrants to other states saying, hey, we can't handle it. Excuse me. From an infrastructure standpoint, we can't handle all of the influx, so we're going to have to send some of them your way. Now that, for want of a better way of putting it, every state is a border state, how can the Biden administration not at least come to the table?
Well, that's just it. When you have 7 million people in the last 3 years, that's almost 2.5 times the population of Kansas. So that's what we're dealing with. And we know we've caught people, Nick, on the terrorist watch list. The last few months, we have had an increase in folks coming from what's called special interest countries, which are countries that historically have not wished us well. That doesn't mean all these are bad people, but it does mean that a certain percentage of folks coming into this country, if they want to do us harm, we are very, very vulnerable, not to mention the fentanyl, not to mention human trafficking and all the other bad stuff. It's just remarkable the president is unwilling to do anything about it. There's a group of about 60 House Republicans that were at the border this week calling more attention to it. I've been down there before. I've led a trip down there. We've got to keep applying pressure to the administration to finally come to the table and fix our broken southern border.
Well, and part of the issue here is, at least at my house, and I don't know if it still works that way at your house, I'm going to guess it does. You got several kids. When you are looking at your household budget, you say to yourself, okay, we can spend money on this thing that we want to do, but we can't spend money on this other thing that we might also want to do. It's not that either thing is better or worse than the other. It's just you have to make a decision at some point. Well, given that situation and the many threats that are going on overseas these days, whether it be the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas, and the fact that Hamas doesn't seem to care what the name of the country is they hide people in, and Israel says, hey, we're going to go find them wherever they are. Between all of those things, then also we have this thing on our southern border. So as someone whose job it is, at least as a representative, to look at the priorities and say, this is the thing out of all these important things that we're going to spend money on, what do you think that order should be?
Well, it's got to be the border. It's got to be the border. Understand that, this is what I think about it. Every $10 billion we spend is about $30 per American. So far, Nick, we spent a little over $100 billion in Ukraine, which is a little over $300 per every American. And so now we're in a spot where the administration is coming to Congress asking for more money for Ukraine. And, hey, I want Ukraine to win. I wish them well. I certainly don't want Russia to win. However, there's no plan. There's no strategy. Meanwhile, it's hard to justify. Why would we spend more money to Ukraine and help them to secure their border when we're unwilling to secure our own? This makes no sense. So we need to prioritize in keeping our nation safe. That's the number one responsibility of the commander-in-chief, and you do that by securing the southern border. Unfortunately, it's been so bad for so long. We now have 7 million people in this country illegally. What was a mess earlier has just gotten worse.
Well, and what kind of money would you have to put out in enforcement to even be able to find all the people that are these quote-unquote gotaways? Well,
that's just it. And we know that, look at this way. If 1 in 1,000 is a bad actor, it wishes us harm, that's scores of people that are in our soil. This is not good whatsoever, not to mention the strain on our services. And again, I'm for legal immigration, but this current system that is in place makes absolutely no sense. I understand that President of the United States has never been to the border as president. The supposed border czar, Kamala Harris, has been there one time. She went to El Paso. Well, El Paso is not where the real issues are. They should go to Eagle Pass. They should go to McAllen, where I have been. And you would know after being there for about 5 minutes that this policy that's in place is just flat out wrong and makes no sense.
The Farm Bill is basically on hold. By that I mean the old Farm Bill has been renewed for another year. You and I talked about that. So that means that the due date now is September 30th of 2024 for any longer-term legislation, if that happens. And I hate to use the "if that happens" phrase, Tracy, but at this point, where are we? Do you even have text or anything to look at?
I've been very, very frustrated with this process, how long it's taken. We've offered up, or I've offered up, a series of some significant or some positive tweaks and changes to the Farm Bill. I think this Farm Bill will be evolutionary, not revolutionary. I think it is a scalpel, making a handful of tweaks and changes. I don't think it's a sledgehammer to make wholesale changes. I think the majority of producers in Kansas and the Big First like the current Farm Bill. Crop insurance, is a very, very important risk management tool that we got to strengthen and make better. I've been one of the last voices in Congress saying we need a 5-year Farm Bill. I'm glad it was extended for a year, but we need more certainty than that. We need a 5-year Farm Bill to give the certainty that our producers need and deserve, so they can make the decisions they need to make for their operations.
So, really, when we're talking about a 5-year Farm Bill and Congress's wheels turn pretty slow, do you think we actually get there? Forgive me for saying so. By the time you and I talk at the fair in September of this year, do you think we'll actually have something?
There's no desire to let this lapse till later in the year. The closer it gets to the election, the more difficult it's going to be to get done. Doing it in a lame duck also is not an alternative that anybody that I've ever talked to wants to see happen. So I am cautiously optimistic that we'll get it done before then. But we will see. You got to get the House on board, through the Ag Committee and then through the floor of the House, the Senate as well. And then in a divided government, it's got to be something that the president is willing to sign as well. And the process has just taken a lot longer than I would like, but where we are. As we move into this next new year.
All right. So what are your priorities that you say, hey, this is what the first district has sent me to Washington to do the one thing we haven't talked about that you started at the top of the conversation with was the overall national debt and the growing debt that we have, that there's just more and more money on the proverbial credit card. What can be done about that?
Well, a host of things, and you'll see, I voted against all these big spending bills that have come through, American Rescue Plan, Inflation Reduction Act, these trillion-dollar bills. Through the appropriations process that we've done in the House last year, repeatedly, I would vote for amendments that would reduce funding kind of within these agencies, departments. We've got to figure out how to get our fiscal house in order. Nick, we are now $33 trillion in debt as a nation, $33 trillion. I understand 2010, 14 years ago, we were at $13 trillion. So we've added $20 trillion in the last 14 years. This year, the interest alone on the debt, just the interest, will exceed $1 trillion. We will spend more money in servicing the debt and interest on our debt than we'll spend on our military this year. Our debt is getting away from us fast, and is not good, and we've got to instill some sanity in Congress. So, I've been voting against these crazy spending bills, advocating loudly. We've got to start balancing our budget and get to a better place fiscally if, to begin to protect and be the leading nation in the world.
So ultimately, how big are each of these pieces of the budget? In other words, you have, 12 appropriations bills? How big are each of these pieces, kind of roughly? Like, where can cuts be made?
Varies widely. The Department of Defense is the biggest one, more than $850 billion. Non-defense, it just varies widely, department by department. And the answer is, where could cuts be made? I would say when you have a $6 trillion budget, cuts could be made everywhere. I mean, there is so much waste, fraud, and abuse, I believe, in the federal government. I think there could be belt tightening, literally hundreds, thousands of places that we could do better and try to get our spending under control and back in check.
Again, we're talking to Congressman Tracy Mann. He heads back to Washington next week, but right now he's in southwest Kansas doing town halls to find out what Kansans would like him to do.